another episode of Behind the Scenes. Today we have a very special guest, Vlad. Thanks a lot for taking some time out of your business schedule. What have you got for us today?
Very animated. I like it. So today I'm talking about Foqal. It's this awesome AI bot that is awesome for everybody, and everyone should go and install it. It's pretty cool.
Does it also do blockchain and blockchain AI? No, just
on a related note, there's a guy that's been trying to get me to get blockchain in this, so I'm trying. I'm trying very hard.
Good. Let's step back a little bit. So you said bot, you said AI. That's all nice, but what does it actually do? How is that useful?
Gotcha. So how about I'll just do a demo and then I'll kind of answer those questions.
Awesome. All right. I take it we see a little demo. Okay.
You see my demo Slack screen thingy?
Yeah. Perfect.
All right. Cool. So what Foqal does is it will automatically use AI to detect questions and automatically find you an answer to your toughest questions. So let's imagine, I already kind of wrote one of the questions, but let's imagine somebody comes in and goes, "Hi, how do I install Red Hat?" So without any kind of prompting, without any kind of explicitly invoking the thing, Foqal will detect that you're asking a question, find the most relevant answer from within all of your internal sources, and tries to give you the best answers that it can find. Right. So in this case, if you look, it will, found one answer from a previous Slack conversation, a couple answers from, Confluence or whatever your internal assets might be. And at the very bottom, you'll see that it's asking you for feedback. It's saying, was this answer helpful? And it answered my question. Was it helpful? And you still have a question, or is it not helpful? And the idea here is that if you click helpful and answer question, then because this is only visible to you, we want to notify the rest of the channel that your question was already answered so they don't have to think about it. So basically, this is the kind of the most easiest way that people interact, is that they come in, regular channel, they don't even know that this thing exists. They just go ask a question and automatically it gets answered, and nobody else has to think about it. Nobody else has to be distracted from their day jobs of doing this. So, there's a couple of places, there's a couple of things where these questions come from. One thing you'll see is, again, it's Confluence and previous Slack conversations. So let me show you how that previous Slack conversation things work. And I'll launch my demo script. Something else, I guess. So imagine you have two people talking. You have Michael and Kay, and Michael asks Kay a question like, "Hey, how do I create a JavaScript array?" Kay helps Michael. Michael's happy, right? So at that point, Foqal not only detects the question that Michael's asking, but it's also detecting the answer that Kay provides to Michael. And it will send a message. In this case, it's saying to me for demo purposes, but it'll actually send a message to Kay. Say, "Hey, Kay, we found this is something useful. We believe this is something that could be useful in the future. Let us store it for future," right? And she can click ignore and it'll go away because maybe it's, private or something like that. She can edit the question and answer to provide more context or, whatever it is. And then she can finally click store. And as soon as she does that, it becomes available as a potential automatic answer to people asking kind of a similar question in the future. That makes sense?
Absolutely. Yes. So, so far, understand, Foqal essentially tries to be kind of not too annoying or too interrupting people or whatever in their flows, but more being helpful in the background, seeing what's going on and offering things as you go along.
Yeah, exactly. So, and this is why it's very much designed to, all the messages are only visible to you. You can invoke it directly by just using the /Foqal command or something. But, the whole goal here is that we don't expect people to necessarily always do that. We expect people are going to just not know this thing exists, come in, ask a question, and we don't want to annoy the rest of the channel. We don't want to bother the rest of the channel. So we'll kind of message directly to the person.
Right.
So even in our most successful installs, a lot of the people don't even know that it's kind of there, because unless they ask a question that we can interact with, unless somebody asks a question that we can answer for you, many people don't even know that it exists until they get value out of it, until they're getting something really cool out of it.
Gotcha. And sorry, did you mean to continue the demo, or can I ask some other related
Yeah.
questions?
Well, yeah. Go ahead. I mean, yeah. Go ahead, and then I can also talk about like
Right.
kind of how it's installed and stuff today.
Right. So you mentioned a couple of sources that could be external, internal. I believe, if you think about the deployment behind the firewall and enterprise setup, how do you like where and how do these sources come into place? Is it something where you can configure on a per channel basis, or how do you actually make Foqal like pay attention to certain knowledge bases or whatever?
Ah, gotcha. So let me drag my other screen in. So there's an administrative component to this entire thing. This is basically just one example, but the idea here is that you can go in and just kind of add yourself to some integrations. And generally what it is that you go to this like admin site. Currently we're offering these 3 external ones that you can self-configure, and then there's one that I can configure for you. But the idea is that we can currently just crawl your kind of Zendesk and Atlassian cloud products. We can crawl kind of any kind of public website. So in this case, this is my demo one. So it's like it's scraping some like how-tos and that kind of stuff, and it's just pushing it in there. And then we're currently working on Google Docs. We're currently so with Atlassian, we're currently supporting Jira. We're currently working on Confluence. So we're kind of building up these sets that you can come in and basically just press a couple of buttons, configure it yourself, and then the questions will essentially get indexed at that point, or within a few minutes they get indexed and they become available to answer these questions.
And I remember from like how I stumbled upon Foqal was essentially through the community Slack, right? And I remember there was the Stack Overflow, the Stack Overflow integration, right? You had that there.
Yes.
So any kind of these Q&A sites, I guess, that makes certainly sense. Where you already have this kind of like, here's the question, and then you have potential ranked answers for that.
Yeah, and actually some of our best answers actually come from not necessarily the structured question and answer formats, but it's actually from like docs. So some of our best docs come from, or some of our best answers actually come from going to these open source like doc, pages, like these kind of things. What we do is we scrape them, or download them. Maybe scrape isn't the nicest word to say. We borrow them, and we take them apart into smaller chunks, because the idea here is like, a lot of times these docs are really, really long. We don't want to say like, oh, okay, well, the answer to your question is in this really long thing, right? So what we do is break it up into smaller chunks, and then when somebody asks a question, we send them the exact chunk with that text, kind of reformatted as a Slack message. And then we'll of course give them like a reference to exactly in the doc where that thing is. And that's actually been so far like the best. Like looking at numbers on one of our biggest customers, the best answers, like I just pulled the numbers now, in the last few months, 54 of the answers came that were helpful, that were marked as like something that's actually useful to people. 54 of the times it came from Stack Overflow. 260 came from previous conversations that were kind of recorded, like in the demo I showed, and then 286 came from previous docs. So interestingly enough, a lot of the answers actually do come from just, you have some docs, we go and basically download the docs, slightly reformat them and make them available. And, which kind of begs the question of like, did you read the effing manual?
Right. So this is a huge shout out for all the wonderful docs writers out there, that this is actually super valuable, and I guess it's all about the context, right? If you're able to actually pull the exact paragraph or whatever section someone is looking for, it's kind of like this is a friendlier version of RTFM, right? It's kind of like yeah, it's I don't have time to read like 500 pages, but I actually appreciate this one section that actually answers or contains the answer to my question.
Yeah.
Awesome, cool. Any more on the technical end?
Well, and actually, I wanted to mention that you brought up docs. The one interesting thing about the docs is actually we're working with like the docs communities. We're actually going to install this thing on one of these like big Slack channels for tech writers soon. We're working with tech writers in general and people that create these docs. And the interesting thing that this is providing for them is that it's giving a lens into exactly who the reader is. In the past, people will say like, okay, who am I writing these docs for? Like, who's my target reader, right? And you can kind of guess what the profile is, but here you're actually getting a very, very specific view into what are the questions that people are asking and who are they? What are they trying to get at?
Right.
And even from like the micro level, it's like just to see what question is the most being asked, is kind of like indication of what can we improve on in the docs. Right. So we're working very closely with the docs community on how we can use this as a feedback mechanism to the docs, to like the docs themselves.
Right. On a related note, like what I'm a big fan of and user of Slack, obviously. The um, integration with Slack as a kind of the front end, as the interaction part, is kind of random, right? I mean, this just happens to be like, yeah, a nice starting point because that's where a lot of people are in the community. But I mean, nothing holds you back to, there are these in web app with website chats that pop up. It's like, hey, have you got a question for me or whatever? And typically they're at least to me, most of the time they're kind of annoying because they don't really offer me something unless I have an actual question. Where I actually would love to have that, right? Any plans in that direction, that you're like having a different front end other than Slack, or in addition to Slack?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so again, yeah, Slack, as you said, is just the starting point, is just the place where we know that there's a lot of people today. We know for the open source world, there's a lot of people using Slack. And I mean, there's like kind of like the movement from IRC. I think a lot of people are getting out of IRC and moving into Slack. Also in the corporate world, a lot of people are using Slack, right? And there's just this kind of this battle that's brewing between Slack and Microsoft Teams, where we don't have to choose a side. We can actually just support both. And then, so other than Microsoft Teams, the next thing that you might actually even think about is like, you're thinking of like, oh, imagine you're in Word and somebody props up something. Well, then you're thinking, well, no, that's Clippy. That's annoying, right? Well, the thing that you actually, if you
Clippy is kind of cool, right? I mean, like now it has a retro cult status, right? Like,
yeah, it's cool, but you wouldn't want another Clippy, really.
Right.
But at the same time, if you look at Google Docs, they actually added this Explore feature, which, like in the bottom right hand of every, Docs and Sheets and presentation and stuff, they have this feature that like basically goes and analyzes your data and gives you additional insights on your data, right? So in a way, that's like a more modern version of Clippy, which I imagine this would be something as well, right? Is that imagine you're writing a doc, and not necessarily that we're popping up with saying, hey, are you trying to write a letter? Let us help you write it, right? Or so like the Explore feature basically analyzes your information and it analyzes your actual like doc, or it analyzes your like, let's say, sheet, and says, oh, here's some averages, here's like a graph of this kind of data and stuff. So it's giving you an additional insights based on your existing data. So here it's kind of like what we're thinking about is the same direction of like, well, what if we're providing additional insights on not just your current doc that you're looking at, but all of your company data, and helping you make either, helping you make business decisions on your data at a very, very quick rate. Because what we're going to do is we're going to recommend small tidbits of information that are supposed to be really, really relevant to what you're looking at, what you're doing today, or what you're doing right now.
Let's switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit about the machine learning part. I'm not expecting you to reveal your trade secrets or whatever, but I gather, or I understand that it means it's a little bit more than just regex matching. Like, this is a question because it starts with what is, or how can I, or whatever. You're doing a little bit more there, so you're kind of understanding what people are trying to do, and not just matching question marks or whatever.
Yeah, actually, what you just described it would be in most of our cases a bad way to detect. A lot of times, what happens is somebody comes in and says, "Hi, I'm having this problem," and that's the question. And then the response would be something like, "Have you tried blah?" question mark. So,
Right.
so it's like very, very reverse in that situation. So yeah, I mean, the machine learning has to be able to detect that kind of stuff, and it's basically trained along, it's trained along like those kind of conversational, text to say like, what looks like a question, what looks like an answer, how do we detect one and the other. The other interesting part about the AI is that like it's not just machine learning. I don't like to really call it AI. The interesting thing about that is that it's not only just detecting the question and answer. One of the hard parts is actually that in a Slack channel there might be multiple conversations going on at the same time, and you as a person who you're talking to, so you kind of can read it anyway, and you can maybe pay attention 2% to like whatever the other conversation is in the channel, but you need to also you're mainly paying attention to the person that you're talking to. So the bot has to kind of do that too, right? Has to figure out who's actually talking to who and keep these like threads of conversations going, so that it can basically figure out when somebody's asking a question and later on somebody's answering it, who are they actually answering?
Right. Oh, yeah, you're right. It's tricky.
Yeah, so there's some interesting things on that ground. There's some interesting things on questions and answer detection, and then on the other side of like once we find a question and answer, how do we find it that's the most useful answer? How do you convert like something that people are not expecting to be used as a question, right? When somebody just comes in and says, "Hi, I have a problem," how do you convert that into something that we can actually like answer a question on? You know what I mean?
Right. Cool. We initially didn't do that. We jumped right into the deep end. So maybe why you? Why like how comes you had this great idea and know all about that? What's your background? Where do you come from actually? Like not literally, but like what did you do before founding Foqal?
Yeah, so I was born. No, I was working in a LinkedIn for 5 years before this. I was working in like the tech side on security and just kind of like the tech leadership group and stuff. And one of the things that I noticed is that just from every time we were running these large projects, like the last one was right when LinkedIn got acquired by Microsoft, and there was all these like projects around like maybe using how do we use more Microsoft technologies and how do we create some integrations and so on and so on. There was like these big gaps of just like people trying to do some work on one side, people trying to support that work on the other side, and there's these big holes in the middle of just collaboration and communication where like somebody would say something and then that message only gets to the appropriate party maybe 2-3 weeks later when they're already been churning away on this old information. So I've seen just problems like this at LinkedIn and at previous companies, and from there I kind of left, decided to go figure out how to solve some of these problems, talk to hundreds of people. Like, so I've been doing this for about a year. Talked to about 100 people in the beginning, just before even formalizing this idea. Started building this, started kind of getting early feedback, and really only launched this product as it kind like as the first version of it in around March. And it's obviously been iterating ever since. June I launched. In March I kind of had the concept and started building. So yeah, it's June. It's about 4 months. Been iterating. We're installed in about 7 customers or 7 places. So far it's doing well. It's gonna, it's growing a bit, trying to contain the growth a little bit to make sure that it's, that we're able to support it. We're make sure that like this is doing something that people love, and then it's not annoying people, and it's actually providing value to people.
Right.
And so on.
So I can just from my own experience say, to me and like also someone who is trying to answer and helping people on Slack is super valuable, because a lot of these things, especially if it's repetitive, like if the 500th person asked about how do I expose that service, like, well, it is, you're tempted to like RTFM. This is really like the docs are really good about that, and it's really painful to just say, look, here in that section it's in there, and beyond, right? Sometimes like when I'm on a Slack channel, and I might not even know that Foqal is running there, and go like, "Hey, cool, buddy, it's great to have you there." Both from being the one who's trying to answer or help, and having myself a question, right? It's really awesome, like, great UX, and yeah, I'm super big fan. Maybe let's like a quick like detour or like changing the angle a bit in terms of we've understood like what is going on, what happened, where do you come from, and why you're doing that. What are the next steps? Where are you heading? What's your whole idea with that? Where do you want to take
uh, it's a very interesting question. So I'm looking at So obviously growing it to more spaces and using that to improve our data. One of the things I'm looking at right now is just I've been doing, like I'm AI. I'm not really an AI guy. I'm not really a data scientist. So I'm trying to find help in that regard. So one of the things I'm doing kind of in the short term is trying to figure out how to get, the AI better, how to do question detection better, how to do answer detection better, how to do like all those little parts, just, 10x, trying to improve those fields. At the same time, I'm basically growing it out to more communities and stuff, kind of currently at a slightly slower pace, just trying to make sure that we're hand holding everybody through, make sure that we're providing value from the beginnings, that people are seeing what this can, how they can benefit from this just from the beginning. And we don't want to grow too fast. We want to make sure everyone's happy. And then over the next few months, it's going to be about, trying to get this on more places, trying to get better data using that, trying to, scale this up to just, kind of like maybe not as many users, but try to scale it up to provide as much value as we possibly can to, whether it's all Slack communities and then, kind of from there, other communities. And then try to see how we, so it's already formed as a corporation. So it's, going through the standard cycles of what corporations need to do is like how to scale this, how do you get some investors, how do you, hire some people, that kind of stuff.
Right. Awesome. Maybe last question from my end. Well, like, if you have anything to share or show, please do. But one thing that I would be interested in, especially if people out there when this goes live and people are like, oh, awesome, like, where do they start? Right? Do they send you an email, or have you maybe got a website, or how do they get it? Can they download it somewhere? Do they need to ask you to install it? What have you got? Where do they go? What do they send?
Yeah. So right now, if you were to get it within the next, I guess, month, then regardless, go to Foqal.io, Foqal.io, Foqal. It's and right now it kind of, there's like a sign up screen, but that basically just contacts me. You can also just email me at Vlad at Foqal.io. Talk to me, and then I'll kind of go create an account for you. One of the things I'm trying to work on over the next like month or so is to just really streamline that process, where essentially you'll be able to go on Foqal.io and just install it yourself, and you don't have to kind of go through me or anything like that. So there's kind of two sites on there right now. One of them is just for the more corporate side, is like, hey, if you want to go install this at your company, go right ahead. Here's the sign up screen. The other side is the kind of like, it's, /OSS, like open source software. It's more designed not necessarily for open source software, but it's designed for open communities where it's anybody's allowed. There's no there's no requirement for you to either pay for that, pay to join that Slack, or there's no requirement for you to be in a company to join that Slack. So it's kind of open for those kind of teams. So for those kind of teams where it's completely open, we offer that for free. For companies, we do charge a kind of per active user fee, which we're working on.
That's awesome. So, and I'm sorry.
So, short story, go to Foqal.io or contact me at Vlad at Foqal.io.
And I got it. You're very responsive, and hopefully at some point in time you won't have the time to be that responsive anymore, because you're busy counting all the dollar bills and whatnot. And like as I said, I'm a big fan, and I really hope that for you this works out, because I think this is, like, to me the big next step necessary in this whole bot world or whatever, and thinking of having that on a mobile phone, maybe on Slack or maybe on some other environment. I think this has huge benefits and is really very useful for people in any be it private or in an enterprise setup. I think this is really awesome. Any final words? Any take home messages, or anything you want to share or tell our viewers out there?
No, just first of all, thank you for
Sure.
talking to me. Thank you for getting value out of the product and enjoying it, and any kind of hopefully you're finding even more value, and hopefully it becomes even better over time. Yeah, I mean, I guess the only take home message is, hey, go install it. Let me know how you feel. Tell me, I'm early on. I want as much feedback as humanly possible. So the best feedback I'm getting is just like, even if you tell me to go away and that this thing sucks, that's still good feedback. I love anything you can give me. So, yep, go install it. Let me know how you feel. Let me know how you like it.
All right. Thank you so much, Vlad. Cheers.
Thanks.